A father quietly sending millions to help his struggling child, only to discover that nearly $2 million has simply vanished into thin air. No receipts, no explanations, no clear trail, just a gaping financial hole that investigators say should not exist inside one of the most tightly controlled institutions on Earth. And now the question echoing through the halls of Buckingham Palace is chillingly simple. Where did the money go? And who really knows the truth? Because according to a shocking internal audit that was never meant to become public, the numbers inside the monarchy's private financial records don't just look messy, they look dangerous. The leaked report claims that $1.9 million linked to Prince Harry cannot be accounted for, not misplaced, not delayed, completely missing from official explanations. And the discovery didn't happen under the flashing lights of tabloids or the chaos of social media rumors. No, it happened quietly, deep inside the monarchy's financial offices, surrounded by dusty ledgers, sealed records, and accountants trained to notice even the smallest inconsistency. What they found was not small. It was a pattern so strange that it forced professional forensic accountants to stop their routine review and launch something far more serious, a full investigation. The story begins in January 2025, when forensic specialists from the global auditing firm KPMG were carrying out a routine annual review of the Duchy of Lancaster, the ancient private estate that provides personal income to the monarch. For centuries, this estate has quietly generated enormous wealth through land, property, and investments. It is not taxpayer money. It is not parliamentary funding. It is the king's personal financial empire. And every year, auditors comb through its records to ensure everything remains in order. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Rows of transactions, standard remittances, routine disbursements. But then something began to stand out. Not a single mistake. Not two. A chain of transactions that didn't behave like normal royal finances at all. Payments labeled vaguely. Documentation missing. Accounting trails that simply stopped. One investigator reportedly described the pattern in chilling terms. It looked like bloodstains on parchment. Between 2022 and 2024, investigators discovered a series of payments authorized by King Charles himself and sent to accounts linked to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. 17 transfers in total, and together they added up to a staggering $3,847,000. Now here's the part that made auditors freeze. Out of that entire amount, investigators could verify legitimate explanations for only $1,947,000. The rest? Gone from the paperwork. Nearly $1.9 million had no supporting documentation whatsoever. No invoices, no contracts, no receipts, no expense reports, nothing. Just the cold, unblinking numbers of a financial ledger showing the money had been sent and received. Imagine the moment that realization hit. Inside the Royal Accounting Office, investigators stared at the figures again and again, hoping it was a clerical error. But the deeper they looked, the worse it became, because the missing money wasn't from public funds. It wasn't part of government budgets. It came directly from the Duchy of Lancaster, the king's private estate, essentially money from a father trying to help his son transition after stepping away from royal duties. Back in January 2020, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had shocked the world by announcing they were leaving their roles as working royals. They said they wanted independence, financial freedom, a new life in California. But the reality behind the scenes was far more complicated. Leaving the royal system didn't mean the cost disappeared. Security expenses were massive. Legal battles were expensive. Launching charitable projects like the Archewell Foundation required funding. So according to the audit, King Charles quietly stepped in to help. The payments from the duchy were meant to act as a financial bridge, temporary support, while the couple built their new life. But the audit now suggests that bridge may have been misused, because when investigators began analyzing the individual transactions, each one raised new questions. Take the first suspicious payment, March 2022. A wire transfer of $247,000 labeled security consultation services. On the surface, that explanation seemed reasonable. After all, Harry and Meghan had repeatedly argued they needed serious security protection. But when auditors searched the palace records for documentation supporting the payment, they found nothing. No security contract, no consulting agreement, no invoice from any recognized firm, no threat assessment explaining why such an expense was necessary. It was as if the money had simply been sent into the void. Then came another strange transfer. June 2022, $183,000 labeled as operational support for the Archewell Foundation. This time, investigators had a way to verify the claim. They compared the transfer with the charity's own publicly filed financial statements in the United States. The results stunned them. There was no record anywhere showing Archewell received that money, which created a terrifyingly simple question. If the money money wasn't spent on security and it wasn't deposited into the charity, where did it go? And the pattern didn't stop there. September 2022 brought another transfer, $314,000 marked as an advance for legal fees. But Palace legal offices later confirmed they had no record of legal work requiring that payment. No law firm invoices, no case filings, nothing. Then another payment surfaced, $198,000 supposedly for property maintenance at the couple's Montecito home. Investigators checked property permits and construction records. Once again, nothing. No major renovation, no structural repairs, no documented work that could justify nearly $200,000. But the most shocking entry appeared in April 2024, a transfer worth $422,000 labeled emergency medical expenses. Think about that for a moment. An emergency medical crisis severe enough to require nearly $500,000. Naturally, auditors assumed there would be hospital records, insurance documentation, or medical invoices. Instead, Palace officials quietly confirmed something astonishing. There had been no known medical emergency in the family during that time. No hospitalization, no major illness, no medical billing of any kind, which means investigators faced a disturbing possibility. Either the label was completely false, or the money was used for something so secret that it had to be disguised as a medical crisis. By this point, the forensic accountants no longer believed they were dealing with sloppy paperwork. They believed they were looking at intentional financial concealment. And the deeper they dug, the more troubling the situation became. Because according to the leaked report, none of the 17 questionable transactions followed the financial protocols required inside the royal household. Not one. Every transfer above $50,000 normally requires formal approval from the Lord Chamberlain's office. Detailed documentation must be submitted in advance, and receipts must be provided afterward within 90 days. But investigators discovered that in all 17 cases, those safeguards were bypassed, and the entire operation appears to have been handled by one single palace finance official who has since quietly left their position. One person controlling every step of the process. One person approving emergency transfers. One person bypassing standard oversight. The situation had suddenly transformed from a financial puzzle into something far darker, because the audit now suggested that royal protocols, centuries of financial safeguards designed to protect the crown, had been deliberately sidestepped. And inside Buckingham Palace, one terrifying thought began circulating. This might not just be a family dispute. It might be the architecture of deception itself. And the worst part, the story was only just beginning, because the palace accountants had already spent 2 years begging for answers, and what they received in return would only deepen the mystery. And here is where the story takes a darker turn, because the palace didn't immediately accuse anyone. Instead, they did something far quieter and far more patient. They asked questions over and over again. Inside the royal accounting offices, supervisors began sending polite requests for the missing documents. They needed invoices, receipts, contracts, any proof that could explain where the millions had gone. At first, the requests were calm and routine. Paperwork delays happen in large organizations all the time. No one assumed scandal, but the answers never came. Weeks turned into months. Months stretched into years. And the emails from the palace finance department slowly began to change tone. Between April 2022 and September 2024, accounting officials reportedly sent 43 separate requests asking Prince Harry's team to provide the missing documentation tied to the transfers. 43 attempts to resolve the problem quietly. 43 opportunities to explain the transactions. And yet, each request seemed to disappear into silence. No invoices, no receipts, no explanation. By late summer 2024, the tone inside the palace accounting office had shifted from patience to alarm. One final email reportedly warned that if the missing financial records were not submitted, the case would have to be escalated to senior royal officials and outside auditors. That message was supposed to trigger a response. Instead, something strange happened. The requests stopped, not because the documents arrived, but because the silence became complete. Only one response ever surfaced, an email from an employee connected to the Archewell organization. It reportedly promised that the paperwork would be delivered soon, but the documents never appeared. And what investigators later uncovered painted an uncomfortable picture of the atmosphere surrounding those requests. According to sworn testimony from multiple royal staff members, simple financial questions were sometimes met with sharp pushback. Some officials claimed that when they asked for documentation, they were accused of harassment or told they were interfering in private matters. One former assistant private secretary even described a direct remark attributed to Meghan Markle that stunned those present. The statement allegedly made it clear that once money had been given to them by the family, how it was used was no longer longer anyone else's concern. Inside a royal institution built on centuries of strict financial accountability, that attitude landed like a thunderclap, because the monarchy's financial system doesn't work on personal trust alone. It works on documentation. And documentation was exactly what seemed to be missing. Another moment reportedly deepened the tension. In July 2023, investigators learned that Prince Harry himself had a heated phone conversation with a palace finance official. During the exchange, he allegedly argued that the money had been promised to him without conditions, and that he would not tolerate what he described as bureaucratic interference. From Harry's perspective, the funds were family support. From the palace's perspective, they were still part of a regulated financial system that required accountability. That clash of viewpoints exposed something deeper than just missing receipts. It revealed a philosophical divide inside the royal family itself, because when investigators compared Harry's financial documentation with the records of other senior royals, the difference was impossible to ignore. Forensic accountants looked at the finances of Prince William, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward, all of whom also received funding through royal estates. What they found was almost boring in its consistency. Compliance rates above 97%. Every transaction documented. Every expense justified. Receipts submitted on time. Missing paperwork was rare and quickly corrected when discovered. But in Prince Harry's case, investigators found something that had never appeared in the financial history of the royal household. 17 questionable transfers. 17 instances where required procedures were bypassed. And nearly $2 million without explanation. No other royal record looked anything like it. That comparison transformed the investigation. Refusing to engage with investigators and daring the royal household to pursue legal action. And that is where the real dilemma begins. Because taking legal action against one's own son would create one of the most explosive royal crises in modern history. Yet failing to act could damage the monarchy's credibility even more. Some investigators believe that if strong evidence of wrongdoing emerges, the case could eventually reach the UK Serious Fraud Office. At that point, the issue would no longer be a family dispute. It would become a criminal investigation. And suddenly, the missing $1.9 million would represent far more than a financial mystery. It would represent a turning point for the monarchy itself, a test of whether centuries-old institutions can enforce accountability even when the people involved share the same bloodline. Because in the end, this story isn't only about money. It's about trust. A father's trust, a family's trust, and the fragile trust that holds the entire monarchy together. And right now, one haunting question still hangs in the air. Where did the money really go, and who inside the palace already knows the answer?